You see the high stakes cash game leaderboard. Different to a tournament leaderboard. When you see the white figures, that means they've made money, and the red ones means they're losing money. So I'm not sure if you noticed in the last hand, but Phil Ivey sat down. Just happens to be one of the best players, if not the best player in the world. Bit of a scary guy to sit down at a cash table with at a $250,000 buy-in, Grant.
Yeah, well, he's no stranger to $250,000 buy-in tournaments and probably $1 million buy-in cash games. He's notorious for playing some of the highest stakes games in the world and doing very well for a long time now.
Well, Newey opens. He just won a hand off low before. He's got pocket sevens. And it folds around to low again. We see that he has the 6 of diamonds. And he has a 9 to go with it. And the flop, a 4-5-7 flop.
Well, that's an interesting flop. We've got a top set for Newey, open-ended draw for low. The fact that he's got the 9, he actually makes a higher straight if the 8 does come, rather than just the middle pin straight.
Well, Newey didn't waste any time. He fired in with top set.
Well, low's not going anywhere. You don't play 9-6 off pre-flop, get the 5-7 4-flop and fold, that's for sure.
That's the only fair way. I told them that's what they should do.
Well, this could be interesting to see how it pans out. Lots and lots of money could go in here. Remembering at home, this is real money. That was a real raise to $20,000. Back over to Newey, who's sitting there with top set. Turned around and looked at low straight away.
Yeah, Paul definitely loves that raise. He has top set.
And he calls, so we will see a turn.
I mean, just in general.
The turn is a deuce of diamonds.
Well, that actually gives low a double gut shot. Straight draw. A 3 is also now good. And will he continue with the aggression? We know that Newey certainly isn't going to go anywhere. Could see a big pot.
Well, this flop raise could mean that he's going to continue with his aggression here, or will he opt to back down?
Well, I'd be very surprised. It'd be a pretty ordinary line if he just decides to back down now. And he's reaching for the plaques, and it's going to be a decent sized bet. About 34,000 by the look of it.
I don't know if it applies.
34,000 is correct. Each of those plaques being 25,000. Now Newey with a set of sevens.
Remember, Newey covers low. He sits there with almost 500,000 in chips. And at some stage, Newey wants to get value from his hand. It's not easy to flop a set. He has top set here.
And it looks like a call. So Newey treading very carefully, waiting to peel the river. The river is a 4 of diamonds. That gives Newey a full house.
Now the fact Newey has just called the turn, we might see low continue with the story here, continue with the aggression.
Will he fire again?
The 4 certainly shouldn't change anything.
The pot now, $126,000. It's one of those situations you've invested so much. Do you take another stab knowing that do you turn your hand into a bluff? I mean, that's what he's been doing, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's not turning it into a bluff. It's already
been
a bluff.
bluffing, that's right.
But, I mean, the only way he can take down this pot and win the money back that he's invested, plus Newey's 60-odd thousand, is by betting this. I mean, we know that Newey won't fold, and he's actually going to raise the river, but I'd expect a bet of around 80,000.
Wow. 74,000 is the bet, and Newey watching every move now. You can see a bit of movement there. He's tapping his toe.
Well, there's 200,000 in the pot. As you can see, low's got considerably less than that. I'd expect a shove here plenty of times from Newey.
It never hit 3 times.
Yeah, but okay, let's do come on, more. Not 10, not more than, we cannot, let's see how many I remember.
7.
He takes a little bit of a glare at how much he has.
And this,
Dream scenario, having top full house and getting a guy to bet, check raise you on the flop and bet 2 more streets into you.
I have 5. Let's do 5.
Just thinking how much value can I extract here? And I think he's going to go for all of it.
Oh, here it comes. Look at this, a very big raise.
5 props there.
That's a lot of plucks.
Remember, each one of those plucks is worth 25,000. He's bet an even 200,000.
Almost $500,000 in the middle. And Lowe, who has 9 high, is thinking, why did I triple barrel bluff?
Obviously, he's just going the Hollywood here. He's seen this on TV, Paul. How do I save face? Yeah, I'll just tank for a couple of minutes, pretend I have some type of decision. We know that that decision is going to be a fold.
Taking your plans out, yeah. We're going to do it too.
Well, I must say, he's making it look pretty good.
Well, Lowe actually has the nut low. There is no hand that he could possibly be holding that is worse than 9-6 here.
Well, you don't want to show any weakness to the other players, and that's exactly what he's doing. He's disguising a very difficult fold.
Well, I
And
apologise.
oh, look at that, he lets it go.
I apologise. He could have 9-3. That is worse.
So Newey there with a very big pot of $400,000 cash.
I thought he might have a 6. He could have had pocket 6s, or he may have been open-ended on a straight. So 4 on the river was beautiful as long as you hadn't got pocket 4s. He bet 75,000 on the river. Pretty 99.9% sure I was head at that point. So obviously raised him to try and get some more chips, but unfortunately he folded.
$1,000 of profit. Ike Haxton now with 50k in profit. And if you look down the bottom, 3 names in the red, and Lo Xing Fung is down about $144,000, so he's got a bit of work to do.
Interestingly, though, Paul, Lowe has added $250,000 to his stack. You can do that in a cash game. That's the difference between cash and tournaments. You can top up your stack whenever you want, as long as there's no cap. This game, there is no cap. It was just a minimum buy-in of 250. So Lowe is sitting there with about 360,000 now, which covers most players.
Phil Ivey opens his first pot and gets called by Ike Haxton, and Lowe's in there as well,
What a shock.
as is Newey. Family pot.
Yeah, well, Lowe and Newey have battled a couple of times already. Newey taking a big pot off Lowe earlier with top set of 7s.
It looks like Patrick Antonius and Richard Jong are in there, so a 6-way pot.
You don't get a lot of this in tournament poker, but given the stacks are so deep in cash games, a lot of people like to come along for a bit of a ride.
Oh, it is a ride. A 7-8 deuce flop. Checks around to Phil. He checks as well.
Isaac's looking pretty happy here with the king-queen.
As you can see now, the graphic is catching up and we're finding out what the players have. But if you're at home, you could try and figure out what they have on your own. That is what these guys are so talented at doing.
Isaac's going to bet his draw.
Still here, guys.
We see that Richard Yong has the ace of spades. We're not sure what other card he has there, but there's 2 spades on board. So he has at least a backdoor draw. He's called. Isaac's bet. It's now 90,000 in the pot. And Phil calls as well.
Well, if Richard Young has another spade, then Ike Haxton could be in a lot of trouble if a spade turns. And is that a spade?
That is a 3 of clubs.
It's a 3 of clubs. I apologise. I just thought I'd scare you at home. Ike Haxton with a big draw. We're waiting to find out whether Richard Young has the nut draw. And look at this. Is that a 4 I see?
It's very quiet table.
I'm sure it is. We still don't know what Phil Ivey has.
Yeah, and this one's firm.
Phil reluctant to show his cards to the camera at this point. But he has obviously a piece of the board there. He has called on the flop after a bet and a call. It's usually a sign of some strength. Some piece of the board.
The pot's now about $116,000, and we still have 3 players in it and 1 card to come.
We saw before that Richard Young had the ace of spades. So obviously he's got the ace 4 of spades, which is the nut flush draw, and a gut shot draw now as well.
That could mean curtains for Ike if the river is a spade.
If you think you're the best hand,
The action now
gotta pull the trigger.
on Ike Haxton. Both players checked, and look at this.
75.
Reaching for a lot of chips.
$75,000 And Richard Young folds. Such a big draw, but he gets out of the way.
We see Phil involved in his first hand of this table. Such experience here.
Well, Phil Ivey, we don't know what he had. Hoping we can catch a glimpse, but right now he looked straight across at Ike Haxton. There's an ace of clubs.
And he's gone all in.
And he's moved all in. So Phil Ivey with a big move on Ike Haxton here. And Ike, look at that. His body language tells you everything.
We know that Phil's got the ace of clubs and the ace of hearts.
Wow. What a hand that Phil Ivey was keeping from us. He had rockets. And Ike Haxton picked an incredible time to bluff off $75,000 on the turn. And he's gone from a very, well, stoic player to a guy who just hasn't stopped moving. Phil Ivey just looks across at him and says, I gotcha.
Well, Isaac's a 4-1 underdog here. And he has to call 150 into 416. He's not getting the right price.
But he wants to, you can tell.
Well,
can't you?
We all know Isaac has a lot of gamble in him. It'd be a bad call. That's for sure.
But he's assuming his king and queen are live, isn't he?
Well, he could be, yeah. I mean, Phil could have just any old overpair. He has the granddaddy of them all, unfortunately for Ike. Obviously,
I think Ike feels guilty.
and I think he knows he's been caught with a hand in the cookie jar. I mean, Isaac had a legitimate hand. He was betting a draw with some overcards. Pretty strong hand. But it's going to be very hard to call off here.
I bet you he's wishing he took the free card now. It checked to him, and he elected to bet. Sometimes you should just check, shouldn't you? I can say that. It's easy. I'm watching.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that was a $75,000 bet.
Well, the players looked like they showed a little bit of weakness. Isaac was happy just to take it down. If he does get called, he's got the overcards and he's got the flush draw.
Well, he folds, and Phil Ivey will take down a pot of over $400,000 with a very creative check raise on the turn with pocket
Spades
aces.
being dead actually is interesting there.
Doesn't matter how long you've been watching him, he continues to amaze.
So in this hand, Ivey gets dealt the rockets, pocket aces. The flop comes 3 babies with 2 spades. So now they've got 3 players to the turn, and Isaac's in position with king, queen of spades. He's got 2 overcards and a flush draw. He doesn't really have the overs because Ivey has the aces. Now he's in a tough spot and decides to bet $75,000. I'm surprised about that because it comes back to Ivey, and Ivey decides to go all in, and now he's in a tough spot. With the big draw that he has, he knows now the king or queen isn't good. He figures Ivey probably has a set and elects to fold the hand. But I'm really surprised, first of all, that Ike put himself in that spot, but very impressed with Ivey's discipline to know his man and know that he's going to bet there so he can get the check raise in.
And he kind of came into the poker world with a bit of a bang. Won PCA in the PCA main event in 2007. And since then has played the highest stakes cash games online and live and done very well for himself.
Phil Ivey. Yeah, the best player in the world. Raises. He's got ace deuce of hearts.
And as you can see, there's no straddle in this hand. So the raise size a little bit smaller, back to 6,000 again. So the pot going to the flop, if it's just a single raise pot, obviously going to be a little bit smaller.
And Doug Polk calls with pocket eights. Perhaps a little bit of set mining. And the flop. Well, a 9-10-6 flop, all hearts. We've got Max Altergott joining us as well with Queen Jack offsuit. And Ivey's flopped the nuts.
Yeah, Ivy's flopped the nuts. And Max has an open-ended straight draw with the jack high flush draw. And Doug has an inside straight flush draw.
Well, Ivey leads. The pot's about 36,000. Ordinarily, if you flop the nuts, you're very worried about how you're going to get paid. But right here, judging by what you're saying, Grant, is he's going to get paid.
Yeah, everyone's got a little piece of it. I mean, Max's hand looks pretty, but he's facing a bet and a call. He just has queen high. He does have a couple of draws, but those draws, and in this case it is correct, those draws might not be live.
Well, he hits his draw on the turn, so actually both players do. So Ivey with the nuts. Now Doug Polk with an 8 high flush, and Max Altergott with a jack high flush. So What's happening here? Just carry us through. Ivey leads again. Pot's getting bigger now. It's up to 100,000.
I don't think Doug can continue with the hand after Max calls on the flop there.
Still with a straight flush draw, though.
He does, but he has one out.
One
he can't
card.
like his 8 high flush.
So you're saying there's a chance.
Yeah, always a chance, but he lets it go, and that's the right decision.
Now Max with the jack high flush. Now Ivey's led on both streets here.
Well, Ivey led into 2 opponents on the flop, and he's leading into 2 opponents on the turn, even though the turn bought a 4th heart. Now Max has got to think, what's Phil betting twice with into 2 people that the jack high flush beats?
Calls.
Oh, Max calls. The pot grows to over $150,000. The river,
Check a bet.
a jack of spades, doesn't change anything really.
No, it doesn't. But if Phil bets here, Max has got to think, well, I only beat a bluff. I only beat the 8 of hearts, or the 7 of hearts, or the 4 or 3 or 2. They're the only flushes I beat. Phil's bet 3 times now. I just don't think Max can call.
85,000 was the amount. The pot was in fact 136,000, not 156. So the pot now at $221,000, $85,000 Max Alter with a jack high flush.
Folds.
And he folds. He makes the correct fold, but it did cost him some dough.
It cost him some money. I don't blame... I can't fault his call on the flop. His call on the turn was okay as well, given that a lot of the time if Phil doesn't have it, he's not going to fire a 3rd time. So he's going to get to showdown relatively cheaply. Obviously, this occasion, Phil did have it. He bet big. Max made the right laydown.
So this is another multi-way pot where Ivey has ace deuce of hearts and it comes beautiful. 10, 9, 6, all hearts. He's basically got the nuts unless someone has a straight flush. Now the other 2 players in the hand both have good hands. You got 8s with a heart, queen jack with a heart. So it makes sense that Ivey bets here and they both call. Now the turn card comes a heart, and I'm actually a little bit surprised that Ivey bets here because it's very unlikely they're going to call unless they have a set or 2 pair. Maybe he was worried about that, or maybe he's playing his image. The 8s makes a really good fold, Doug Polk does, and then of course you get the call from Max Altergott with the jack of hearts. On the river, Max is smart enough to get away from the hand. Ivey went pretty greedy, betting a lot, like over 80,000 in that spot, and Max was smart enough to fold, knowing that it's very unlikely Ivey was going to bluff by betting flop, turn, and river without the ace of hearts.
Real hard-earned cash. But in this game, it's just a few big blinds.
250 grand is the buy-in. One of the most famous cash games in the world. My understanding over the last decade or so that all of these players and so many players around the world plan their trips around coming down to the Aussie Millions because they get so many selections in tournament. They get the 100k, the 250k, the 25k, the main event, and then the cash game, which is, that is quite a schedule. And then, of course, you could just cross over the road and watch the Australian Open around the same time of year.
And beautiful Melbourne weather in January. 45 degrees Celsius, that is.
We don't want to make it easy for you. Max Alter with Queen Jack of Spades.
Low is called with, I guess...
anything, really.
Just 2 cards. He'd probably call with 1, I'd imagine.
He's one of the more entertaining players at the table. Here's Ike Haxton.
Ike has been playing pretty snug. Comes in with a big 3-bet there.
Well, he's got pocket aces. So Richard Yong folds, as does Phil Ivey. You can see the cash game players, they get up, they go for a walk, they have something to eat, they call a friend. Cash game it seems so much looser than a tournament, yet the stakes are so much higher in so many ways. Lot to think about here. Max Alter with Queen Jack of Spades, facing a 3-bet from Ike Haxton. Max will get out of the way.
It's a big size 3-bet too.
Now it's over to Low. And we know one thing about Low. He is unpredictable, but he has no fear.
Absolutely. And he has 300,000 in front of him.
He's going to call. He picks up a plaque and says, yep, I call. Now, Lowe's courage, I must say, it must intimidate other players.
Yeah, he's certainly not scared to put some chips into work.
We don't know what he has. The flop is a 10-7-3 flop with 2 diamonds. We're yet to find out what he's got. But Haxton with aces, Lowe comically checks. Over to Ike, who's kind of got a little smile on his face.
Yeah, well, Isaac has to like that flop.
Well, with that call that Lowe made, the pot's now already 61,000. Quite amazing how these pots escalate so quickly.
I think we're going to see a lot more than 61,000 in this pot. I just have a feeling Lowe has something that he wants to play here. Obviously, getting involved with the call and then the call of the 3-bet pre-flop. We know he doesn't like to fold, and he's a creative player.
Well, Ike with a small bet, 20,000. It's only a third of the pot. Ike obviously trying to keep him involved.
And Lowe getting 4-1 on his money here. That bet from Isaac, like you said, on the small side, looks like he's trying to induce. What I mean by that. And as we can see, Lowe has the set. This is
Wow, well,
this could get ugly for Ike.
no wonder he wanted to get involved.
Very good.
He raises straight off the bat. A big one, too.
He asks Isaac, good? Isaac says, very good. And he says, okay, raise.
76,000.
76,000 back on Ike Haxton. Wow, what will Ike do here?
Well, Isaac has about 200,000 and he's all in.
He moved all in, so Lo Xing Feng with his set of threes.
Shakes his head, no good, he says.
He says no good. He's letting Ike know that his set's got him crushed. Ike Haxton. This is a huge pot. Almost $400,000 in the middle. Now, Lo Xing Feng was down around $200,000 before this hand.
This might square the ledger. And the fact that he's so unpredictable and he's made a couple of moves already, it's just such a no-brainer for Ike to get in the aces here. He's just actually unlucky that Lowe isn't doing it with, the Jack 4 offsuit or something like that.
And alternatively, if Ike spikes an ace here, he'll send him to almost $500,000 in the red.
We're going to run it twice. Okay.
They're going to run it twice. So, ladies and gentlemen, Grant, give us an explanation really quickly of what that means.
Okay, so what that means, usually, in an all-in situation, we'll see 2 more cards. They've decided to run the turn and the river twice. So that means we'll see a turn and a river, and then again, we'll see another turn and a river. If Isaac wins both, if Lowe wins both, he wins the whole pot. If they win one each, they'll just take their money back.
Well, it looks as though Lowe is ahead on both streets here. He's won the first street and he's won the second as well. So Lowe will win the entire pot. Something you don't see every day in cash game. But you will see it here at the Aussie Millions at Crown Melbourne. And Ike orders another 250,000.
Well, in that hand that I just played with the aces, there's really no way I can fold it against anybody, but even more so against Ronald. There's 60 in the pot pre-flop and only another 180 or so to play. So I have pocket aces, no straights or flushes possible. I'm just getting stacked against anybody, but I'm even a little more excited to do so against him, I guess. I don't think things will play too differently going forward based on the fact that I lost that pot. I think any of the players at the table see a hand like that and they know the same exact thing would have happened to them if they were in my shoes. Maybe people will think I'm stuck a little now, I might be a little frustrated. That might make them either more or less likely to run a big bluff against me, more or less likely to call down, but I think really it won't make that big a difference.
Haxton, the big loser at the table at the moment, down almost $250,000, and Max Alter got almost $200,000 down. Alternatively, Phil Ivey, the best player in the world with the most chips on the table, he's got $350,000 in profit in front of him. We are waiting for fireworks here, reminding our viewers that this is cash. The plaques you see, $25,000 each.
And to go with that, those orange chips are worth 5,000 and the blue chips are worth 1,000.
And a bit of a pot brewing here. Looks like Antonius is interested. He makes the call with King Jack offsuit. We know Max Altergot has the ace of hearts. Low fold.
Ha! Amazing.
Ike Haxton now.
And we saw Ike cop a little bit of a beat with his aces earlier on in this cash game. He ran into the bottom set of low and got stacked.
Freeway.
Max Altergott with ace deuce of hearts. Ike Haxton, we're still waiting on what hand he has. We are 3 players to the flop. And it is a jack 8 deuce flop. And it is a rainbow flop.
Okay, a little bit of a piece for Max. He has bottom pair. Patrick has top pair. Isaac Haxton also in the hand.
16,000.
Well, Max Altergott firing with bottom pair, $16,000. Over to Antonius now, who has top pair.
It's a good bet into 2 players. It's representing a little bit of strength. Bets about half pot. We do know that Patrick isn't going anywhere with top pair. Good kicker here. Looks like he's going to raise.
Raise.
Isaac has a gut shot straight draw. There has been a bet and a raise. I'm sure Isaac's going to let this one go. Unless he feels like he wants to get a little bit tricky.
Well, he looks at his chips. Look at this. Ike Haxton is going to
38,000
get involved. He's already down $250,000. He's making a pretty big call here.
It's a ballsy play. Max was the pre-flop aggressor. He gets 2 callers. He bets into 2. One of those does call, and Isaac decides to overcall just with the gut shot and queen high.
Well, he got the information he needed and got out. Now, $122,000 in the middle. Ike Haxton with a gutser draw and Antonius with top pair. And wouldn't you know it, the turn, an incredible 10 of clubs. So Ike Haxton strikes gold on the turn because he has a backdoor flush draw.
Well, not only does he fill his inside straight, he actually turns the straight flush draw. So he strikes absolute gold here. It's easy when you know it's coming, Paul.
Now we need it because I have to play the World Series event because I have a bet, a stupid bet I made 3 years ago.
Patrick is in a lot of trouble here.
World Series of Poker starts.
When he sees this hand, he's not going to be too happy. Isaac makes a questionable call
So we do it in the middle of May.
on the flop.
14th, something like that.
The pre-flop aggressor bets out, gets raised by Patrick Antonius, and Isaac just decides to cold call with Max still act behind him. It's a very unconventional play, but it's going to work out for him here. And Patrick still has top pair.
It looks like a bet of around about 40,000. So a value bet here. Patrick taking another look at his cards. Top pair, reasonably good kicker.
And remember, Patrick has shown a lot of strength by raising on the flop. Isaac cold calls with Max behind him. Patrick might sit here and think, well, is my pair of jacks with king kicker any good? Looks like he's going to see a street,
Cool.
see a river card.
And the river is a 6 of diamonds. So Ike Haxton in command here. A pot of now just over $200,000. Antonius checks. And the question on Ike's mind, I'm sure, is how much do I bet?
Well, he can go for maximum value here, given Patrick's shown a lot of strength coming along on the turn there.
And just then, Ike Haxton announced all in. So the pressure on Antonius now.
And similarly, Isaac has shown a lot of strength in this hand. I don't think there's any way Patrick's going to call here with just the pair of jacks. Isaac is representing a much stronger hand. He does have the nuts.
A little bit of a smirk on the face of Patrick Antonius. And a sigh, and he folds. So he makes a good fold. And, well, Ike Haxton, who, like I said a little bit earlier, he was down $250,000. That pot's got to help him quite a bit. Strikes gold on the turn. And we'll be back with more high-stakes cash game.
Almost 2.5 million Australian dollars.
Now, I'd probably retire with a start like that. There is Ike Haxton, who's worked his way back up from $250,000. He's opening the pot.
Raise 17.
Makes it 17,000. We see a queen of diamonds in his hand and a queen of hearts. So he's got pocket queens. Over to Richard Yong.
Well, Richard Yong has come in with a 3-bet to 17 after Isaac's opened to 7. We can see Richard has a king of hearts. Richard usually plays it relatively snug and has done so far, so I expect him to have a pretty legitimate hand here. Isaac with another monster. We know he's lost a huge pot with aces earlier on.
Well, he's only going to call here. No fourth bet or a 4-bet. The pot's almost 40,000. Can't wait to see what Richard Young has alongside his king. Well, there's one in the board, but there's a set of queens for Ike Haxton. So Richard Young, that second card will be very important. Oh, wow, look at this. Richard Young has 2 of them, so there's 2 sets on the board, Grant.
Yeah, and it's slow played. It's 3-bet pre-flop. Isaac just calls, and the flop goes just a bet and a call. I expect some fireworks on the turn or river here. Richard leads out again.
They're moving fast. 80,000 in the middle. And now he bets. The pot's up to 114. A set of queen in Ike's hands. He calls. We go to the river. And it is another 5, so both players with full houses. Oh, this could be really, really big.
Well, that is the worst possible card for Isaac. He's now filled up.
50,000.
Should be scared of a straight now, obviously. That might have been slowing him down a little bit on the first 2 streets. Now he's got to think his hand is good.
Well, he's just worked his way back up to 112 in the red. He's announced all in, and Richard Young. Wow, he says he'll lose to pocket aces, but he will not lose to pocket queens. And Ike Haxton, he's really disgusted with that.
Lose for your pocket ace. Your pocket queen, I beat you pocket queen and lose pocket ace. That's 100% cut.
Richard Young, all smiles, explaining that he figured that he had aces or queens. He loses to aces, but he beats queens, and that's exactly what he did.
189,000.
Well, he beat the chips out of Ike Haxton, let me tell you.
This is a really unlucky situation for Isaac Haxton. It's rare that you flop a set and somebody flops a bigger one. It comes ace, king, queen, and he decides to check call, really looking to trap his opponent. Of course, he does it again when the turn is a 5. He check calls. The river's another 5, so now he can beat the 10 jack. So essentially, only aces or kings beat him. He checks. And Young, of course, bets his kings full. And for a second, I thought Ike might just call, but he decided to go all in, and I can't blame him. And of course, he got the bad news when Young turned over the kings. Just a unlucky cooler.
Welcome back to the 2014 Aussie Millions High Stakes Cash Game. And boy, have we been seeing some cash fly around this table. A seat will cost you $250,000. And the players on the right on this leaderboard, you can see they are making money if they are in white, and they are losing money if they are in red.
Buy in tournaments and the cash game every year for at least the last 5 or 6 years.
Action folds around to Antonius. He will open for 6,000.
Ray, 6,000.
Patrick's stuck a couple of 100,000 in this game so far.
He's opened with ace-3 of hearts.
Fold.
Lo Xing Fung comes along for the ride. Wait and see what he's got. Ivey's involved with 2-5 of diamonds. Certainly a lot of hands you won't see in tournament poker, that's for sure. Polk looks like he's in there with pocket 4s.
Well, in tournament poker, a lot of the time we're rather short stacked relatively.
There could be a lot of action on that flop, Grant. There's 6-5-4 there, 2 hearts. We have, well, Antonius has got the nut flush draw, and Polk's flopped the set, and we still don't know what all the cards are.
Polk has a set. Richard Young has at least a gut shot straight draw. Phil Ivey has a pair and the bottom end of a gut shot. Antonius, like you said, has the nut flush draw plus an open ender.
Fold.
Well, Low folds. He gets out of there. He had Queen Jack offsuit. Now we're going to find out what Richard Young had.
I think we're going to see some...
He raised.
Well, I mean, he could have 8-7. Have both of these players in bad shape.
What?
51,000.
If he has 8-7, this could be an incredible hand. You got a set, the nut flush draw, and a straight draw. And if he has 7-8, he has the nuts. Let's wait to see if the graphic will catch up. Meanwhile, actions on Doug Polk, who's facing a very big bet.
Meanwhile, Max Alter fits in dinner. While he waits, an interested bystander.
Don't want to miss a hand. Not at these stakes anyway. The pot, just over $130,000. Polk will call.
And this pot will swell much bigger than $175,000, I'd say, Paul. Patrick not going anywhere.
Antonius casually calls. What a turn this could be. A queen of hearts. So Antonius with the nuts now.
Well, we know Richard Yong is drawing dead, regardless of what his other card is.
And his body language kind of suggested a resignation in that check. Now over to Polk, who's still sitting with a set of 4s.
Yeah, Polk can still win this hand. We know at the moment Patrick has a lock on it.
Oh, Patrick's going to place a pretty big bet here. He may not want to see the river. 115,000. Richard Yong, who made a big raise on the flop, is now out. And Polk, with a set of 4s, has got to pay 115,000 if he wants to see his set turn into a full house. Or maybe.
Well, it's a fine line for Patrick. He obviously wants to get value from his flush here. But at the same time, he doesn't want to lose Doug. Regardless of what Doug has, Patrick knows that he's in good shape. But Doug has a hand that can catch up.
Doug makes the call, so the pot swells to almost $450,000. The river, a 7 of diamonds. No full house for Polk. He checks. Now Antonius has the nuts. How much can he get out of him?
Well, it's a good card for Doug. It's now 4 to a straight there. He may be able to get away from it. I'd say Patrick's going to shove. It's 445 in the pot. He has 200,000 behind.
Yes, you're right, Grant. He has moved all in. I can't imagine.
Doug probably thinking that river card sucks. I can't call now. Little does he know it's helped him a lot and helped him get away from the hand.
You're right. He lets go of his set with a bit of a smile and a big sigh. And Antonius, who lost a big hand before, collects a lot of plaques, which we know are 25,000. There's a lot of orange ones in there too. And from what I remember, you told me they were 5,000. So let's have a look here. As Patrick Antonius is now he has a white figure next to his name, which means he is making money. Phil Ivey still the most profiting player on this table. And all the players in red, they need to make up some ground.
And Doug Polk, who was profiting well over 120,000.
That's right, Ike Haxton is down almost $300,000. Lo Xingfeng, who started very down and then went back up and now he's back down again. Grant, we talk about the swings. Phil Ivey's swing is doing very well, all the way up to the top at around 350,000.
Yeah, Ivey's on the escalator. Doesn't come back down, just goes up and up and up. Isaac Haxton slowly getting back into it. He's only down 290,000, Paul. Be happy with that.
Well, he has 3-4 of clubs, does Doug Polk, and he opens over to Lowe, who makes the call.
Doug Polk with what I like to call a cash game hand. These little suited connectors, always often disguised. You can hit a hand, no one's going to put you on it. Isaac Haxton getting involved with a 3-bet here. He's got jacks. We know
certainly does.
We know he's had aces and queens, and he's had about $500,000 loss with those two hands.
Well, he's 3-bet the button for $28,000 to one of the more unpredictable players at the table who has 6-4 of diamonds. He has no fear, does Lo Xingfeng, and he makes the call. So Ike Haxton in command with pair of jacks. $70,000 in the middle. Ike looking to get some money back. Oh my goodness, what a flop. An 8-7-5 flop so low. Well, he's flopped the straight against pair of jacks of Ike Haxton.
Well, I don't think Ike's going to get his money back here, Paul.
I can't believe it. Ike with a big bet. Let's see how this works. Check. Ike bets.
Isaac with 3 premium hands, and it's going to be 3 big losses, possibly stacked 3 times, twice by the same guy.
All in?
He announces all in straight away. Ike Haxton this time having a think about it, and then he just says call. He doesn't like it, and he's not going to like it at all when he sees Lowe's hand. He has completely smashed Ike Haxton.
He says drawing dead. He's not quite drawing dead.
Actually, 9-10 is...
But he's in a lot of trouble.
All good?
You can see Ike Haxton's body language. He just can't believe it.
He does have running straight cards for chop. The board can pair, give him a few outs to a full house. He can hit a jack. There's a few cards that can keep him in it. They're running it once or more.
The turn is a 5.
That opens up the possibility of Isaac winning the hand. Needs a 5 or jack.
The river is a meaningless 3, so
All right, rebuy.
Ike Haxton announces rebuy as he gets hit again by the Lo Xing Fung freight train.
And Isaac down about 500,000 now.
I can't wait to see the balance sheet after that one. All the money you're seeing, ladies and gentlemen, in the middle of the table, that is real cash.
It's been a rough day for me so far, but you know, you have to turn up to a game like this ready to lose a bit of money. And I don't regret any of the decisions I've made in terms of the play of the hands. So it's just like a new day when I go back in there. I've got a fresh stack and I'm going to be playing just the same as I would have before. Even being down 2 buy-ins, I don't think it's really going to impact how the other pros are going to play against me very much. You know, they saw the hands, they would have played them the same way, and maybe they'll expect me to be frustrated, but I doubt it. I don't think I am visibly frustrated. I think things will just keep going along about as they have.
Wow.
Does that mean he...
Stage with 312,000, and Ike Haxton, well, he's the one that's losing the most. He's sitting on a loss of about $335,000. There is one of the most entertaining players you will see, Lo Xing Fung. He's kept us very, very curious. He's very creative, and he is certainly courageous. We can see Doug Polk from the United States. He's involved with Ace-Queen offsuit. Our newest player, Paul Foy, he raises it up to 23,000. Folds around. There you see Patrick Antonius in shot. Round to Polk now. Looks like he's going to come in for another raise.
Raise.
Wow. 58,000.
Remember, these guys are very deep stacked. They're sitting with at least 300,000. So you think there's 150 big blinds effective stacks. Doug's 3-bet with the ace-queen. What does he do if he gets 4-bet here? Does he want to get in 150 big blinds pre-flop? It's a tough spot because if he gets re-raised here, it's almost like he's turning the ace-queen into a bluff.
And we don't know what Foy has, so incredibly, this is kind of like the end of a thriller movie. We don't know the ending of it.
I think he has a little something, Paul. He's called the 4-bet.
With over 100 grand in the middle, I can't wait to see how it ends. The flop, an 8-5 deuce. There you see, $121,000.
There's so much money in the middle. Doug can't just check now that he's missed. Obviously, he has to continue. He's going to continue with a decent bet.
Betting 56,000.
And Foy takes a look at his hand, and we see pocket jacks. So he's sitting on a monster here.
Yeah, it's a sexy little flop for jacks. He has the overpair to the board. In a 4-bet pot, he's got to be pretty comfortable. Obviously, there's still some hands that beat him, that's for sure.
Well, he's not electing to get too aggressive. He's just calling. We're going to see a turn. The king of hearts on the turn.
Now, obviously, that hasn't hit either player, but it could slow them down.
Could be a bit of a scare card. Will Polk fire again?
It looks like Doug is pretty keen to empty the clip here. What I mean by that is bet on the turn, set it up for a river shove.
Waiting for the amount from the dealer.
And the way this hand's played out, Doug definitely 4-bets a hand like ace-king. He's definitely going to fire again on the flop. Now that the king has landed, he can certainly represent a hand like ace-king. Remember, Foy is also behind queens, kings, aces pre-flop.
The pot, a staggering $320,000. The action back on Foy, who probably should have raised on the flop.
Well, he was very, very comfortable on the flop. Now not as comfortable. And
wow, look at that.
I like the line he took on the flop. If he did raise there on the flop, he's turning it into a bluff with the jacks.
Well, Doug Polk's 4-bet pre-flop meant he continued with that aggressive line, like Grant said, and it allowed him to take it all the way. And look at the chips that he's starting to amass now.
So in this hand, you have an example of how aggression really pays off. Doug Polk raises with ace-queen, he gets re-raised, and then he decides to 4-bet it to really represent something strong. And when you're playing deep cash game poker and you got a pair of jacks, not a lot of good situations can happen. He comes 3 cards under a jack, and of course,
losing it. Ike Haxton, the biggest of them all. He's down quite a bit of money. He's run into Lo Xing Feng's hands so many times at this table, and yet Lo's kind of almost in the even area. Grant Levy, are you surprised by anything you've seen so far?
Not really. I mean, the unpredictable nature of the guys from Macau, like I said, they bring a lot of value to the table, but you know, if they start card racking or hitting some hands, there's going to be some big pots and someone's going to get cooled or be on the receiving end of a beat, and that has been the case today.
Well, you can see here Fua's picked up pocket tens and he's involved. Lo's also involved.
And of course the other end of it, Paul, is when they get legitimate hands like this, they're kind of hard to believe.
Well, Ike choosing not to get involved this time. Neither does Doug Polk.
10,000. Cool. Heads up.
And these two will go heads up. Anything could happen. 7-8 of clubs versus pocket tens. And the flop is a 10-9 deuce flop.
Well, yeah, anything can happen. Guaranteed, Paul. This is going to be a big pot. A draw against top set. These guys have obviously played together a lot as well.
Cool.
It looks like a bet and a call.
Check.
The turn is a 6, so the straight's there now. So a dominant set of tens gets crushed on the turn.
Okay, now let's just count how many chips they have in front, Paul, because that's about how big the pot's going to get by the end of it. All those plaques, all those orange chips and blue chips,
Look at
they're going to
this.
find their way into the middle here.
He just leaned over and looked at the amount of chips he had. He's holding the nuts at this stage, and he leaned over and looked at his stack and said, how much of that can I get?
And Paul Fua's like, okay, you can take all of this, no problems. I've got top set.
I love these guys. They're the most entertaining players I've seen in such a long time. Fua still has a set of tens. It's a monster hand.
6, 7, 8, 9.
Straight.
Oh, I'm not sure what to make of this, but I'm pretty sure Lo was just
All in.
named. Oh, wow.
All in.
He announces all in.
Massive overshove.
7, 8. I think I can afford.
Lo can't believe it.
Just casually eating his noodles.
In
6, 9.
pocket 6. Call.
Wow, he's just called. I can't wait to see how big this pot is. It's almost $1 million in the middle. He has called with top set.
做
Moment to run it
做我
once.
馬
Oh, 7, 8.
Well, what else can you say after losing a pot of... Well, he hasn't lost yet. How many outs has he got, Grant?
Yeah.
10?
100萬
Yeah, well, he's got 3, 6, 9, 10. Yeah, he's got 10 outs.
10 outs to the river.
How many times would you like to
要
run?
買30萬咯。
呢個有幾錢啊？
我呢度400. How much I bet on the turn? 400.
They're trying to figure out how much
980.
is in the middle.
I
We
can
can
tell you
see.
it's pretty close to $1 million, and we had that figured out on the flop.
買60得啦，你要買了
OK，我買60，買60。
嚇？
買60，買60。
Well, they should have had that discussion a little bit earlier, perhaps. Now there's $1 million in the middle.
誒買60，
I mean, the hand plays itself, Paul.
買
The
60
straight
你要
versus top
買
set.
20萬嘅喎，唔好做為啦，大家唔OK 啦
Running it once or twice? Sorry.
，once
Yeah, once please, Fua says. He's a big underdog here.
我嗰啲嗌啫。
Pure gamble.
唔係啊，唔係啊。
Pure gamble from
開一擺
Fua.
啊，兩擺，
嚇？
知你買咗每人開一擺啦，OK once。
Running it once?
They were discussing whether they wanted to run it
Yeah.
twice.
Once?
Yes.
Yeah.
2 6 9
Okay.
Deuce. Oh, yes.
On the river is an ace of hearts, and that decides an amazing pot of almost $1 million will go to Lo Xing Fung. He turned a straight and crushed Fua's set of tens. Incredible. That is just incredible. Grant Levy is sitting aside me, and I can almost tell that you're as stunned as I am.
Oh, that's pretty to watch. Just a massive cooler. And all the guys are actually sitting on the table thinking, well, he's got $1 million. I'm going to get every single chip out of his stack.
400,000 down. Lots of ground to make up. Ike Haxton was there. He's got some work to do. Actions on Antonius again. It looks like he's going to get involved again.
Raise to 7,000.
Raises it up to 7,000.
Fold.
Folds around to Phil Ivey. He will fold.
Fold.
Low. Action-packed player. Creative, courageous, and will play anything. Very hard to read.
Low sitting there with a paltry stack of 650 big blinds. You just never get that in a poker tournament, that's for sure. But it's all about the effective stacks. Patrick does have a good $500,000 in front of him at least. So they're very deep stacked here.
3 props. Only.
You just really want to gamble with
Raise.
Paul, don't you?
It's 24,000.
I never beat him. You know how much I lose to him in props? Forget it.
Not me.
One day he killed me.
Paul Newey raises it up, and you can hear in the background Phil Ivey talking about how he cannot beat Paul in a prop bet.
Every hand.
Prop betting a real big feature amongst high stakes players.
Yeah, they bet on 2 flies racing up the wall, I think, Paul. So would I, mind you.
Oh, Phil Ivey. Poor Phil, he's running pretty bad.
Fold, 3 players.
Come on, you don't
Can we
say.
write down and look at it every
Yeah, you can write down, put it in front of me. Okay.
So they're going to write down some prop bets.
So Paul Foy is stuck $500,000. Phil Ivey's up almost $500,000.
Look at this for a flop. A Jack 8-9 flop. And we know Antonius has 10-8 of hearts. What a flop for him.
Straight flush draw with a bottom pair.
Next thing you hit 150. Keep hitting 150 every time until you don't do it. But it doesn't happen that much.
Okay, 50, 100, 150.
Oh, there's some crazy side betting action going, but meanwhile, there's $76,000 in the middle. Low has, we know, a queen of diamonds. That'll work for that board. And Patrick with bottom pair and a straight flush draw. Bets, makes the pot 121,000. We still don't know what Paul Newey had, and he was the aggressor pre-flop. It looks like Low looks like he's going to stay involved. Yes, he makes the call.
Trying to look as nonchalant as possible. We know he's got at least a gut shot. Queen with the queen of diamonds. 10 will give him a straight. But Patrick has a monster hand. He has a straight flush draw. It's not a made hand. He's just got a pair of 8s at the moment, but it's a huge draw. Paul Newey in this pot as well. I'm not sure what he has, but he's certainly contemplating getting involved. It's 166,000 in the pot, a bet of 45,000, so he'd want a good hand to continue, I think.
Especially into a bet and a call. Well, he changed his mind just then as he reached for chips.
It's a very draw-heavy board. Certainly can't be too comfortable with a lot of hands, even overpairs here.
And Paul will fold. 2 players remain.
His heads up.
Here comes the turn. It is a king of hearts, so Patrick's flush. Well, he's got a lock on this hand unless... Well, he does have a lock on this hand. Low can't... Well, there it is. Queen Jack offsuit, so Low with a pair of jacks. They both check. We go to a river. Another jack. That'll cost Low a lot of money, I'd imagine.
Yeah, well, I mean, the board is still very drawy. But there's 3 hearts on there. There's straights possible. But Low does have trips. I think he's going to call a decent size bet. And the fact that he's got 75 billion in front of him.
Well, decent it is. $130,000. And Low's first instinct was to pick up chips, and he just puts them in there. 130 grand.
Oh my God.
So Low realising that he's beaten.
Well, he
doesn't even want to let go of his cards.
So bad, doesn't he, Paul?
Yeah, how unlucky. So
Would you like me to open it?
Low there showing us that he's happy to make a call, even if it costs a lazy 130 grand. And we'll be back with more high stakes careers. The button is with Ike Haxton. This is our feature table at the Aussie Millions high stakes cash game. A game that attracts players from all over the world year in, year out. They come here, they play the 25k tournaments, the main event for 10,000, the 100k and the super high roller, and then there is the cash game. So many ways to spend your money, really. But a wonderful series, one of the biggest in the world, right here at Crown Melbourne. Doug Polk with 7-4 offsuit, and Patrick Antonius, we don't know yet what he has, and the flop, a 7-4-5, so he must have known Grant.
It's easy when you know it's coming, Paul. Just top and bottom pair for Doug. No idea what Patrick's got.
It's 6,000.
It's 2 clubs on board, so there's a draw out there. Pretty coordinated board.
Well, Antonius bets 6,000, and Polk calls, the pot climbing to 18,000, the turn a 5 of hearts.
Now that is a card that could potentially counterfeit Doug's hand. He's leading out.
5,000.
I guess he wants to know where he stands in the hand. If Patrick has an overpair here, then he's taken the lead. Obviously, if he has a 5, that's also good. Or if he has a better 7, that's now good as well.
23,000.
Well, Polk electing to lead into Patrick that time. Patrick having none of it and raising.
And Doug flopped a very big hand that has become a much smaller hand. He just has 2 pair 7s and 5s with no kicker. Still has top pair, of course. But it's very vulnerable at this point.
Well, he makes the call. You can hear a lot of chatter at these tables. Quite incredible. We're talking about prop betting and stuff. The river is a queen of spades.
I expect Patrick continue with the aggression here. Reach for a lot of chips.
$90,000 is the bet from Patrick Antonius. Quite a big bet there, Grant.
That's a big bet. It's almost 1.5 times the size of the pot. Often big bets like this are stone cold nuts or very, very strong hands, making it look like it's bluffy and just trying to buy the pot. And Polk doesn't have much. He's just got middle pair there with a pair of 7s. It's a paired board. There's an overcard to his 7 as well, and he's got no kicker at all. So he's playing 7s and 5s with a queen kicker. He can beat a bluff, and he can beat a 4.
So the price is somewhere in there. Probably. I got it. What's that? Wow.
It's a big decision, isn't it? He obviously thinks he's good here. He's reaching for chips. He's not convinced with Patrick's big bet. Oh, look at this. He's reaching for more chips than I thought he might.
Well, he realises his hand doesn't have a great deal of value, and he thinks he can get Patrick off by putting in a big raise.
Wow, this is going to be a big raise. Well, let's wait for the amount. That is a huge raise.
One day you were just dead asleep. It was weird. In Macau?
And Patrick has to have a think about this.
302,000 is the bet. The pot now at almost $500,000, and Patrick turning almost like an action hero and looking at him with a stare. He can't believe that raise came.
He's probably wishing he'd just bet about half pot. The fact that he's bet so big means he's faced with a huge raise.
All of a sudden, all the chatter at the table has backed off. They've realised that these guys are in a $500,000 pot.
He doesn't like it. And I'm almost certain that Patrick's got the best hand here.
I call.
Wow, he does call. Let's see if you're right, Grant. He turns over his hand, and it is 8-6. So, wow, look at that. He's flopped a straight. He must have considered that that was a full house that he was going to call off to.
Yeah, it was a nice little move from Doug, that's for sure. But Patrick just grits the teeth and calls with the straight.
Wow, well, that is a huge pot of almost $750,000 in cash. And Doug Polk just smiles. Oh, well, I had a go. What do you
I wanted to
do?
make a tanking joke, but I felt like, well, I'm just like bluff raising 300K in the river. Probably just stay quiet.
I'm just telling you, you got so unlucky because I think I folded. It's like my head is spinning from the prop, so I just couldn't fold it.
Well, on the river, this is an absolutely high-level situation. The hand gets to the end. Now, Doug Polk called the raise in the turn, and he's in a tough spot when Patrick decides to overbet. Generally, in this spot, when someone bets more than the pot, that means they're on a complete bluff or they've got a monster. So typically, if you have a mediocre hand, it makes sense to call. Well, that's what Doug has, a 7. He can beat all the bluffs, but not any of the good hands. So then Polk just decides to go bonkers and raise. This is really high-level thinking. He thought to himself, if Patrick has a straight or just trip 5s, I might get him to fold. As it turns out, it didn't work out that way. Patrick made the call, but you got to give the guy credit for really putting Patrick to the test.
We are here at the Aussie Millions Poker Championships at Crown Melbourne. Welcome to the high stakes cash game, the $250,000 buy-in. That's exactly how much it costs you cash to sit down at this table. There is the balance sheet. Patrick Antonius with a huge pot, now up to $600,000 in profit, just about anyway. If you're in white, you're making money, and if you're in red, you're losing money. Ike Haxton, Paul Newey, they're all around the bleeding mark of about $300,000 in the red. So we will rejoin the action now. And the chips are certainly moving around this table. And once again, I'll remind you, I know I keep saying it, it is cash. Grant, you've been playing this such a long time. I have been watching this for such a long time, but it never, ever ceases to amaze me. I can't get my head around it.
Well, they're playing for big stakes, Paul. It's always good to watch. And these guys are certainly not afraid to put chips in the middle. A lot of them have got a lot of history together. But when we're playing with 200, 250 big blinds, 500,000 chips in your stack, you've certainly got to have ice in the veins.
You got 5 players?
Oh, 5 players to this flop. Alter got with ace-queen. And the flop is a Jack-9-6 flop, 2 diamonds. Newey with King-8 of hearts. Dwan with 7-9. Polk with Queen-Jack.
Check.
Phil Ivey flopping equity since 1988.
Check.
He has the flush draw.
Check.
Polk with the best hand, just with a lowly pair of jacks. There's a lot of draws potentially on this board.
38,000 in the middle.
Seat 4 bets, 22,000.
22,000.
22,000.
Betting is like asking a question sometimes, and it's basically what Doug Polk just did. Ivey will call.
And I think just about everyone else will get out of the way, Paul.
Fold.
Max does, around to Paul Newey.
See ya.
Fold.
And one, you're exactly right. We have 2 players remaining. Ivey to the turn on the draw, and of course, Ivey does what Ivey does. 2 diamonds on the turn.
That is a huge shock. Phil Ivey getting there. And poor Doug Polk. He's had a great day. He's just lost a big pot, and he's about to lose another one to the world's best player.
Well, action's on Phil. He fires the pot, a little under 150k. Polk looking for chips.
Yeah, cool.
And he makes a call. That was over 50,000, close to 60. The river, a 6 of clubs. Phil Ivey with a king-high flush.
And that 6 changes nothing.
Ivey moves all in.
6. All in.
Well, Doug doesn't have many chips, so the bet isn't as big as what you think. That's an effective bet just to cover Doug's stack. So even though Phil has, 600 or 700,000, the bet is technically for 160k, which is what Doug has got in his stack.
Definitely costs 8. 10-8, 7-8. Queen 10.
The pot at $362,000.
And as I said on the flop, I said there's a lot of draws out there, Doug. He's contemplating that Phil was on one of those draws and has missed. He's saying 7-8, 10-8, Queen 10. Trying to convince himself that Phil's missed his draw.
Well, there's a real tug of war going on inside Doug Polk. As we see there, there's another guy that loves the Aussie Millions, Gus Hansen, former winner of the main event, also has a tendency to play the high stakes cash game.
It's been a while since Gus has dropped a couple of 100,000. He might as well jump in.
Well, Doug Polk makes a good fold in the end. That cost him a fair bit, and Ivey takes a really nice pot on the turn to build that stack even more with his king high flush.
How's it going?
Maybe Gus is waiting for a seat.
And all those plaques that Patrick have are worth 25,000 each. He's sitting on a huge stack, covers everyone at the table.
And Vogelsang raises it up with pocket tens. Round to another German. Max Altergott. He 3-bets him. He's got ace king. And around to Ike Haxton. Asks how much.
And you look at Gus Hansen in the background, just sweating on Isaac. He knows Isaac has had a bad day, doesn't have a lot of chips left. Gus is just saying, get him in, Isaac. Lose, I want to donate.
It's a hard game to get into sometimes.
And I tell you what, Isaac does have a hand that he can get in here, but he just selects to call. He's going to play this three-way with his jacks. Let's see if Isaac can flop a monster again and somehow get himself stacked. Cool it like he has been a few times today. He's had a very unlucky day.
Well, Vogelsang with tens, Haxton with jacks, Altergott with ace king, 3 very big hands going into this flop. The pot 69,000. The flop, it is a jack 5-3 flop, so that is a great flop for Ike Haxton, who checks.
He's going to slow play his set here. And they're not going to put him on a hand as strong as Jack's, Paul, because as we know, he's on the shorter stack. He's raising 3-bet in front of him. The standard play would be to 4-bet to try and get all your chips in there with Jacks, I would assume.
Will Altergott take a stab? He was the 3-bet aggressor pre-flop. He does take a shot. 24,000. It's a small bet.
Isaac did start the hand with 75 big blinds, so there is a little bit of room. Doesn't always have to 4-bet there.
How will he elect to play it? He just looked down at his chips just then. Will he call or will he raise?
I think calling is the right play.
Well, he follows your instructions, Grant. Will Vogelsang now come into the pot? No, he will not. So he gets out of the way. Tell you what, Altergott doesn't want to see an ace or a king on the turn. You'd think I didn't mean that. The turn was an ace of clubs.
Well, it's funny. He did want to see an ace on the turn. Little does he know
that he actually doesn't.
Yes, that's right.
Well, that could cost him a fair amount of money. He checks.
It goes
and
check.
Wow, the river. Another ace. Well, Altergott here. This could cost him a lot of money.
It's going to cost him every single chip that Isaac has in his stack.
See 3 moves over.
And I call.
Yeah, there it is. So Ike announces all in, and of course, Max says, I call. Why wouldn't you? Pretty big hand, ace king.
134, I think.
And Ike Haxton, who was really having a tough time at this table, has won a huge pot here.
Yeah, he's only 300,000 down for the day now, Paul. He's laughing all the way to the bank to get a loan.
Oh my goodness, I just can't get used to it. And we'll be back with more high-stakes cash games here at the Aussie Million.